What would you do if you had trillions in the bank, buy a fancy car, a big house? Well, the king of Thailand's done all that and then some. We're talking gold-plated everything, private jets, and parties that make the Met Gala look like a backyard BBQ. Stick around, because we're about to show you how the world's richest royal really lives. Meet King Maha Vajiralongkorn, the guy with a bank account that'll make your head spin. We're talking $70 billion. Yeah, you heard that right. He's not just rich, he's one of the richest king on the planet. And boy, does he know how to spend it. But here's the thing, this king's life isn't all glitz and glamour. There's a whole lot of drama too. People can't stop talking about him, and not always in a good way. Ready to see what a trillionaire's life really looks like? Trust me, it's gonna blow your mind. From prince to trillionaire, King Vajiralongkorn wasn't always swimming in cash. He had to climb his way to the top, and boy, was it a wild ride. Let's rewind to 2016. The king's dad, Bhumibol Adulyadej, passes away. Suddenly, our guy Vajiralongkorn goes from prince to king, but this ain't no fairy tale. He's got some big shoes to fill and a whole lot of cash to manage. Now you might be thinking, hey, this guy's probably been living it up in palaces his whole life, right? Wrong. Vajiralongkorn didn't just sit around eating grapes and watching Netflix. He hit the books, and not just any books. We're talking fancy British schools. Picture this, a young prince shipped off to England learning how to be posh at Kingsmead in Sussex. Then he's off to Millfield School in Somerset, but he's not done yet. After that, it's down under to Australia, 5 weeks of military training at the King's School in Sydney. Talk about a world tour. But wait, there's more. Our boy wasn't satisfied with just 1 degree. Nope, he went and got himself 2. First, he graduates from the Royal Military College in Duntroon, Australia. Then, just to show off, he snags another degree in law from Sukhothai Thammathirat Open University, back home in Thailand. Now you might be thinking, okay, so he's smart, but can he fly a plane? Well, funny you should ask. Turns out this king's got some serious pilot skills. He's not just flying any old planes either. We're talking F-5S, F-16S, and even Boeing 737S. That's right, this king could probably fly his own commercial airline if he wanted to. But here's where things get really interesting. Remember how I said there was drama? Well, buckle up, because Vajiralongkorn's personal life is like a soap opera on steroids. We're talking 4 marriages, 7 kids, and enough scandals to fill a tabloid. His first marriage, to a princess naturally, but that didn't last. Then he marries an actress. Spoiler alert, that didn't work out either. 3rd time's the charm, right? Nope. It's not until his 4th marriage, just days before becoming king, that he seems to settle down. But don't think all this drama slowed him down. While he was juggling wives and kids, he was also climbing the military ranks. From staff officer to commander, this guy was busy, and all that training paid off. When his dad started slowing down, Vajiralongkorn stepped up, taking on more royal duties and public appearances. Rolling in royalty. Now you and I might get excited about a new Honda or Toyota, but for this king, that's like getting pumped about a tricycle. His Majesty's got taste, and boy does it show in his rides. We're talking Rolls-Royces that aren't just off the lot, but custom made to fit his royal behind. These aren't your grandpa's Rolls-Royces. They're decked out with all sorts of fancy stuff that probably costs more than your house. But wait, there's more. The king's not just into British luxury, he's got a thing for Italian stallions too. Yep, you guessed it, Ferraris. And not just any Ferraris. These babies are souped up to the max with special tweaks that make them one of a kind. It's like he told Ferrari, make it faster, make it fancier, and oh yeah, make sure no one else can have one just like it. Now you might be wondering, how much does all this cost? Well, let's just say if you have to ask, you can't afford it. The experts say his car collection is worth tens of millions of dollars. That's right, tens of millions. Just on cars. I don't know about you, but I'm pretty sure my entire family tree couldn't scrape together that kind of cash. But here's the kicker. It's not just about how much these cars cost, it's about how rare they are. We're talking limited editions, special runs, the kind of cars that make collectors drool. These aren't just vehicles, they're 4-wheeled works of art, and the king's got a whole gallery of them. You know how some people collect stamps or baseball cards? Well, King Vajiralongkorn collects cars that most of us will only ever see in movies or dreams. Each one is like a prized jewel in his automotive crown. Sky-high living. Literally, we're talking about King Vajiralongkorn's private jet collection, and let me tell you, it's not your average frequent flyer situation. Now, most of us are lucky if we get an extra bag of peanuts on our economy flight. But for this king, flying coach is about as likely as him taking the bus. No, when Vajiralongkorn wants to travel, he's got his own personal Boeing 737 waiting on the tarmac. That's right, a whole Boeing 737 just for him. And get this, he doesn't just ride in it, he flies it himself. You heard me right. This king isn't content with just sitting back and sipping champagne while someone else does the work. Nope, he's up there in the cockpit, playing pilot. And we're not talking about some little propeller plane either. This guy can handle F-5S, F-16S, and even that massive Boeing 737. It's like he's got his own private air force or something. But here's where it gets really wild. Remember how I said there was drama? Well, back in 2011, one of the prince's Boeing 737S got itself into a bit of trouble. German authorities went and impounded it over some 20-year-old Thai government debt. Can you imagine? A royal plane just sitting there on the tarmac, unable to take off. Talk about awkward. Now you might be thinking, okay, so he's got a plane and he can fly it. Big deal. But here's the thing, this isn't just about having a fancy toy. For Vajiralongkorn, it's about showing off his skills and his connection to the military. While other world leaders are busy shaking hands and kissing babies, this guy's up there doing barrel rolls. Okay, maybe not barrel rolls, but you get the idea. And it's not just for show either. The king actually uses his pilot skills, flying himself to different countries. It's like he's got his own personal taxi service, except the taxi is a multi-million-dollar jet, and he's the one behind the wheel, or stick, or whatever they call it in planes. But how does King Vajiralongkorn's air fleet stack up against other big shots? Well, let's just say he's in a league of his own. Sure, other world leaders and billionaires have private jets, but how many of them can actually fly the things themselves? It's like comparing a kid with a toy plane to Tom Cruise in Top Gun, sailing in splendor. Let me tell you, these aren't your average party boats. Now most of us are lucky if we can rent a dinky little sailboat for a day. But King Vajiralongkorn, he's got yachts that make the Titanic look like a bathtub toy. We're talking massive, state-of-the-art floating palaces that could probably house a small country. But here's the thing, it's not just about how big these boats are, it's about what's inside them. Imagine the fanciest hotel you've ever seen, then put it on water and multiply the luxury by 100. That's what we're dealing with here. These royal yachts are decked out with stuff you and I can't even dream of. Gold-plated toilets? Probably. Helipads? You bet. Swimming pools filled with champagne? Okay, maybe not, but would you really be surprised? And get this, the king doesn't just use these yachts for lazy Sunday cruises. Nope, he throws parties on them that would make Jay Gatsby jealous. We're talking lavish gatherings where the who's who of the world's elite come to rub elbows and sip on drinks that cost more than your car. But here's where it gets really wild. Remember how I said the king likes to fly his own planes? Well, turns out he's got a thing for sailing too. Yeah, you heard that right. This guy doesn't just own these mega yachts, he actually knows how to sail them. No, really, King Vajiralongkorn's been into sailing since he was just a prince. He used to compete in sailing events with his dad, the old king, and his sister. Talk about a family activity, right? While your family was playing Monopoly, these guys were racing yachts. Now, you might be thinking, okay, so he's got some fancy boats, big deal. But here's the thing, these yachts are more than just boats. They're like floating embassies. When the king's on one of these bad boys, it's like a piece of Thailand is sailing around with him. And let's talk about how these yachts stack up against other rich people's toys. You know all those billionaires with their super yachts? Well, the king's fleet makes them look like they're paddling around in kiddie pools. We're talking top-of-the-line everything, from the navigation systems to the furniture. But it's not just about showing off. These yachts are like mobile command centers. The king can run the country from the middle of the ocean if he wants to. It's like having a floating palace, complete with all the bells and whistles you need to rule a nation. Palaces and paradises. You know how we all dream of owning a nice house one day? Well, for King Vajiralongkorn, one house just isn't enough. This guy's got a whole collection of palaces and luxury homes spread across the globe. And let me tell you, they're not your average McMansions. Let's start with his main crib in Thailand. It's called the Amphorn Sathan Residential Hall, and it's part of this huge palace complex in Bangkok. Now you might think, okay, a palace, big deal. But this isn't just any old palace. The king moved here from his old place back in 2011, and it's like the crown jewel of royal real estate. But here's where it gets interesting. Our man Vajiralongkorn doesn't just stick to Thailand. Nope, he's got a taste for German living too. And we're not talking about some little vacation home. This king's got himself a luxurious pad on Lake Starnberg, about 25 miles from this fancy hotel called the Grand Hotel Sonnenbichl. It's like he's got his own little slice of Bavaria. Now you might be thinking, why does a Thai king need a house in Germany? Well, turns out he spends a lot of time there, like a lot, so much that it's caused some drama. Remember when COVID hit and everyone was stuck at home? Well, not King Vajiralongkorn. While the rest of us were learning to bake bread, he was living it up at the Grand Hotel Sonnenbichl in the Bavarian Alps. And get this, the hotel got special permission to stay open just for him and his crew. Talk about VIP treatment, but here's where things get messy. People weren't too happy about this royal getaway. Protesters in Thailand were like, hey, shouldn't our king be here during a crisis? And the Germans? They weren't thrilled either. The German foreign minister even said they don't want guests who run their state affairs from here. It got so bad that the German government had to have a little chat with Thai officials. They were basically saying, look, we're cool with your king visiting, but maybe he could, not try to run Thailand from our backyard. And it wasn't just talk. A day in the life of a trillionaire king. For starters, this king doesn't wake up to an alarm clock like the rest of us. No, he's probably got someone to gently wake him up in one of his luxury hotels. And we're not talking about any old hotel. The king's favorite spot? The Grand Hotel Sonnenbichl in the Bavarian Alps. Yeah, that's right, he spends a lot of time in Germany. Why? Who knows, but when you're a king, you can pretty much do what you want. Now, you might think being a king is all about sitting on a throne and waving at people. But our man Vajiralongkorn, he's got some hobbies that'll surprise you. First up, cycling. Yep, you heard that right. This king loves to ride bikes. And not just any bikes. We're talking top of the line, probably cost more than your car kind of bikes. But here's the crazy part. He doesn't just cycle alone. No, this king likes to make a whole event out of it. He's led these massive biking events in Bangkok. One of them was called Bike Un Ai Rak, which means bike love and warmth. Thousands of people showed up to pedal with the king. Can you imagine? One day you're just a regular person riding your bike, and the next you're in a cycling pack with the king of Thailand. And it's not just in Thailand. This king's been spotted cycling in other countries too. There are even stories about him cycling around Switzerland in a crop top. Now that's a mental image you can't unsee. But wait, there's more. When he's not zooming around on two wheels, the king's got another passion. Dogs. And not just any dogs. We're talking about a poodle named Foo. Now you might be thinking, okay, lots of people have dogs. But how many people do you know who dress their dog up in an Air Chief Marshal's uniform? No, really, Foo wasn't just a pet. This dog was practically royalty itself. It attended formal events with the king, decked out in its little uniform. And when Foo passed away in 2016, the king gave it a 4-day Buddhist funeral ceremony. That's 4 whole days of mourning for a dog. Makes your goldfish's toilet bowl send-off look a bit shabby, doesn't it? So there you have it. Royal retail therapy. You might think being king means you can wear whatever you want, and for Vajiralongkorn, that's pretty much true. But he's not just throwing on any old t-shirt and jeans. No, this king's got a taste for the finer things in life. Let's talk about his clothes for a sec. We're not talking about suits from the mall here. This guy's all about designer labels. And not just any designers. We're talking the cream of the crop. Gucci, Louis Vuitton, Hermes, you name it, he's probably got it in his closet. But here's the kicker. He doesn't just buy off the rack. No, that's for us regular folks. The king, he's all about custom-made everything. Imagine walking into a store and saying, yeah, I'll take that, but make it fancier and make sure no one else can have one. That's pretty much how this guy shops, and it's not just clothes. The king's got a thing for watches too. We're talking the kind of timepieces that cost more than most people's houses. Rolex? That's child's play for this guy. He's into the really fancy stuff, limited editions, one-of-a-kind pieces, the works. But here's where it gets really crazy. Remember how I said he spends a lot of time in Germany? Well, turns out that's not just for the scenery. Nope, our man Vajiralongkorn's got a soft spot for European luxury brands. It's like he's got his own personal shopping district right there in Bavaria. And get this, during the COVID pandemic, when most of us were stuck at home in our sweatpants, the king was living it up in a fancy hotel in the Bavarian Alps. And he wasn't alone. He had a whole entourage of 20 women with him. Talk about traveling in style, right? But here's the thing, all this luxury doesn't come cheap. We're talking millions upon millions of dollars spent on clothes, accessories, and who knows what else. It's like he's got his own personal ATM that never runs out of cash. Now you might be thinking, okay, so he likes fancy stuff. What's the big deal? Well, here's the thing. While the king's out there buying custom-made everything, a lot of people in Thailand are struggling to make ends meet. It's like he's living in a whole different world, and it's not just about the money. Every time the king steps out in a new designer outfit or flashes a fancy watch, people notice. Crowning glory. You thought the king's shopping sprees were wild? Well, get ready for the most expensive party you've ever seen. We're talking about King Vajiralongkorn's coronation, and let me tell you, this wasn't your average crown-wearing ceremony. Now you might be thinking, how much could it really cost to put a crown on someone's head? Well, hold on to your wallet, because this shindig set the Thai government back a cool 1 billion baht. That's about $31 million in US dollars. Yeah, you heard that right. $31 million for a 3-day party. But here's the thing. This wasn't just any old coronation. The king made everyone wait almost 3 years after his dad died before he had this bash. Why? He said he wanted to give people time to mourn, but when it finally happened, boy did it happen big. Imagine 150,000 people crowding into a public square in Bangkok just to catch a glimpse of the action. That's like filling a whole city with people who just want to see a guy put on a fancy hat. And speaking of fancy hats, let's talk about that crown for a second. This thing weighed 7.3 kilograms. That's over 16 pounds. Can you imagine wearing something that heavy on your head? It's like carrying around a small dog on your noggin. And it wasn't just any old crown. It had a big old Indian diamond right on top. Talk about bling. But the crown was just the start. The king also threw in a grand parade that lasted for 6.5 hours. 6.5 hours. That's longer than a Lord of the Rings movie marathon. And it wasn't just people marching. They had elephants in this parade, because nothing says I'm king like a bunch of elephants walking down the street. Now you might be wondering, how does this stack up against other royal parties? Well, let's just say King Vajiralongkorn doesn't do anything by halves. This coronation made other royal events look like backyard barbecues, but here's where it gets tricky. Not everyone was thrilled about all this fancy stuff. While some people were all excited about the tradition and the pageantry, others were looking at that $31 million price tag and thinking, couldn't that money be better spent somewhere else? No, really, people were divided. Some folks were like, this is our culture, our tradition, it's worth every baht. But others were scratching their heads, wondering if maybe, just maybe, that cash could have helped out with some of Thailand's economic issues. So there you have it, royal influence. King Vajiralongkorn uses his cash to call the shots. And let me tell you, it's not just about fancy cars and big houses. See, being rich is one thing, but being rich and powerful, that's a whole different ballgame. And our man Vajiralongkorn, he's playing in the major leagues. Now you might be thinking, okay, so he's got a lot of money, big deal. But here's the thing, when you've got that much cash, you can do pretty much whatever you want. And boy, does this king know how to flex his royal muscles. Remember how I said there was drama? Well, get ready for some real soap opera stuff. Back in 2019, the king decided to strip his royal consort of all her titles. Yeah, you heard that right. One day she's living the high life, the next she's out on her ear. Why? The king said it was for disloyalty. Ouch. But wait, it gets crazier. A year later he goes and restores all her titles. Just like that. It's like he's playing musical chairs with people's lives. One minute you're in, the next you're out, then you're back in again. It's enough to make your head spin. And here's where it gets really wild. In Thailand, they've got this law called lèse majeste. Fancy name, right? Well, it basically means you can't say anything bad about the king or the royal family. And when I say anything, I mean anything. You could end up in jail for up to 35 years if you cross the line. No, really, people have gone to prison for things like making fun of the king's dog. Yeah, you heard that right. His dog. It's like the ultimate no jokes allowed policy, but it's not just about keeping people quiet. This law gives the king some serious power. Think about it. If no one can criticize you, you can pretty much do whatever you want. It's like having a get out of jail free card, except you're the one sending other people to jail. And it's not just regular folks who have to watch their step. Even big shot politicians have to be careful. Back in 2019, the king's sister tried to run for prime minister. Sounds cool, right? A princess running for office? Well, not so fast. The king shut that down real quick, saying it was inappropriate and unconstitutional. Just like that, her political career was over before it even started. Philanthropy. Oh really? He's set up these things called Crown Prince hospitals all over Thailand. We're talking 21 of these bad boys, way out in the middle of nowhere. And they're not just some rinky-dink clinics either. These hospitals are top-notch, giving folks in remote areas the kind of care you'd expect in a big city. But wait, there's more. The king's not just about fixing people, he's into fixing farms too. He's got this thing called the Mobile Agricultural Clinic Project. Sounds fancy, right? Well, it's basically a bunch of farming experts running around the country, helping farmers figure out how to grow better crops and raise healthier animals. It's like a traveling farm school on steroids. And get this, the king's even got his own rice. No, I don't mean he's hoarding all the rice in Thailand. He's actually got the rice department cooking up new types of rice. 5 new varieties to be exact. It's like he's the Willy Wonka of rice or something. Now you might be thinking, okay, so he's into farms and hospitals. What else? Well, how about education? Turns out, our boy Vajiralongkorn's got a soft spot for learning. He's all about this thing called lifelong learning, and he's not just talking the talk, he's walking the walk. Every year since 1978, he's been showing up at these Rajabat University graduations, handing out degrees like they're candy. But here's where it gets really interesting. The king doesn't just show up, he's shelling out some serious cash too. We're talking 42 million baht every year for scholarships. That's a lot of zeros, folks. So it all sounds pretty great, right? The king's out there building hospitals, helping farmers, and sending kids to college. But here's the thing, not everyone's buying it. Some people are looking at all this charity work and scratching their heads. They're wondering, is this really about helping people, or is it just a way to make the king look good? No, really, people are torn. On one hand, you've got these hospitals and schools that are actually helping folks. But on the other hand, you've got a king who's spending millions on fancy cars and gold-plated everything. It's like he's trying to balance a yacht on one hand and a hospital on the other. So what's the deal? Is King Vajiralongkorn a secret saint or just really good at PR? Well, that's the million-dollar question. The price of royalty. People might be thinking, how much impact can one guy really have? Well, when that guy's got more money than some small countries, it turns out the answer is a lot. Let's start with the basics. Thailand's government, they're spending a big chunk of change on the royal family. We're talking billions of baht every year. That's money that could be going to schools, hospitals, or fixing up roads. But instead, it's funding the king's lavish lifestyle. But here's where it gets really wild. The king's not just spending government money, he's got his own personal fortune too. And we're not talking chump change here. This guy's worth anywhere from $30 billion to $70 billion. That's more money than most of us can even imagine. Now you might be thinking, okay, so he's rich, what's the big deal? Well, here's the kicker. While the king's living it up, a lot of regular folks in Thailand are struggling to make ends meet. The average Thai person, they're making about $7,000 a year. That's less than what the king probably spends on breakfast. And it's not just about the money. The king's got control over this thing called the Crown Property Bureau. It's like a big piggy bank full of royal assets. We're talking land, buildings, stocks, you name it. And guess who's got his royal fingers all over it? Yep, our man Vajiralongkorn. But wait, it gets crazier. Remember how I said there was drama? Well, people in Thailand aren't too happy about all this spending. They're looking at their own empty wallets, then looking at the king's gold-plated everything, and they're starting to ask some tough questions. No, really. There's been protests and everything. People are out in the streets saying, hey, maybe we shouldn't be spending so much on fancy royal ceremonies when some of us can't even afford dinner. So there you have it. The king's living large, but it's coming at a price. And that price, it's being paid by everyday Thai people. Royal unrest. Remember how I said people were asking tough questions? Well, they're not just asking anymore, they're shouting. We're talking massive protests, folks. Thousands of people out in the streets calling for democracy and reform. It's like someone lit a match in a room full of fireworks. Now you might be thinking, protests? What's the big deal? But this ain't your average street rally. These protesters, they're doing something that's pretty much unheard of in Thailand. They're criticizing the monarchy. Yeah, you heard that right. In a country where you can go to jail for making fun of the king's dog, people are out there demanding changes to the whole royal system. But here's where it gets really wild. It's not just a bunch of angry college kids. We're talking all kinds of people, young, old, rich, poor. It's like the whole country's split down the middle. On one side, you've got the royalists who think the king can do no wrong. On the other, you've got folks who are sick and tired of all the royal drama. No, really, it's tearing families apart. You've got parents who grew up respecting the monarchy, watching their kids go out and protest against it. It's like a real-life version of that movie where the parents don't understand their kids' music, except instead of music, it's about the entire system of government. And get this, it's not just happening in Thailand. Remember how the king likes to hang out in Germany? Well, people there aren't too thrilled about it either. There were protesters outside the hotel where he was staying, telling him to get out. It's like the guy can't catch a break even on vacation. But here's the kicker, all this drama, it's not just about money, it's about power. See, the king's not just rich, he's got his fingers in all sorts of pies. He's changing laws, controlling the military, you name it. And people are starting to wonder, hey, isn't this supposed to be a democracy? So what's going to happen? Well, that's the million-dollar question, or should I say, the billion-baht question. Some folks think this is the beginning of the end for the Thai monarchy. Others say it's just a phase, and everything will go back to normal. Guarding the gold. How much protection does one guy really need? Well, when that guy's worth billions and runs a whole country, the answer is a lot. Like, a whole lot. Let's start with the basics. The king's got this thing called the Royal Security Command. Sounds like something out of a spy movie, right? Well, it's real and it's no joke. These guys are in charge of keeping the king safe 24/7. And we're not talking about a couple of bodyguards. We're talking about thousands of highly trained personnel. But here's where it gets really wild. The king doesn't just have regular old security guards. He's got his own private army. Yeah, you heard that right. A whole army just for him. It's like he looked at other world leaders and said, yeah, that's nice, but I want more. And get this, the king's security isn't just about muscle, it's high-tech too. We're talking state-of-the-art surveillance systems, bulletproof everything, and probably some gadgets that would make James Bond jealous. Now you might be wondering, how does this stack up against other big shots? Well, let's just say the king's making other world leaders look like they're protected by mall cops. The US president, he's got the Secret Service, the Pope, he's got the Swiss Guard. But King Vajiralongkorn, he's got a whole dang army. But here's the kicker, all this security doesn't come cheap. We're talking millions upon millions of dollars every year. It's like the king's got his own personal money pit, and he's filling it with cash just to keep himself safe. No, really, the costs are insane. Think about it. You've got salaries for thousands of personnel, high-tech equipment, special vehicles, probably some secret underground bunkers. It adds up fast. And who's footing the bill? You guessed it, the Thai taxpayers. So there you have it. The king's not just living large, he's staying safe large. It's like he's got his own personal bubble, and that bubble's made of bulletproof glass and surrounded by an army. It's a whole different level of protection, and it's costing Thailand a pretty penny. But here's the thing, with all the drama going on, maybe the king needs all this security. Between the protests and the controversies, it's not like he can just stroll down the street for a cup of coffee. The future of Thailand's trillion-dollar monarchy. So we've seen the king's crazy life, but what's next for this guy and his trillion-dollar kingdom? Well, buckle up, because things are about to get real interesting. You might be thinking, come on, how long can this fancy lifestyle last? And you're not alone. People are starting to wonder if Thailand can keep footing the bill for all this royal splendor. It's like trying to keep a gold-plated balloon in the air. Sooner or later, something's got to give. But here's the thing, it's not just about money. The whole idea of having a king is under the microscope. Some folks are saying, hey, maybe it's time for a change. They're talking about cutting back on royal power, making the monarchy more of a symbol than a ruler. And get this, All this drama, it's changing Thailand big time. The way people think about their country, their leaders, even their own future, it's all up in the air. No one knows for sure what's coming next, but one thing's certain, whatever happens, it's gonna be one wild ride.